It would be difficult to argue that the hero's archetype has not been the most versatile one in the history of the game, with numerous competitively successful iterations and identities. However, entering the modern meta, it can be argued the hero archetype has stagnated in a sense, falling into a single, almost protect the castle type build involving masked hero Darklaw. However, while some may lament at this reality as hero players, and rage at this reality as hero opponents, such an evolution is understandable, for when one looks at the available main deck elemental hero monsters in which to comprise a deck, despite 20 plus elemental hero main deck monsters existing, only a small handful can be even regarded as quality, especially in this meta. Therefore, in the current environment, Darklaw hero variant decks are far and away the most effective at neutralizing opposing decks and actually having a chance at winning. While Darklaw is an important element to the competitive prospects of a hero deck, I'm not really a fan of decks that have this form of Darklaw or bust mentality, for Darklaw is powerful, but certainly it has its holes. Well, with that said, let's see what type of hero deck I like to run. Obviously, with so many elemental hero cards, reviewing them all would be rather ridiculous, so instead, let's just look at the meat and potatoes of the deck, the masked hero support. Among the masked hero fusions, Contrast is one of the more annoying ones, for while its effect is powerful, rather identical and on par to Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss or Cursed King Siegfried, its summoning condition is rather unforgiving, not only requiring 2 masked heroes, but also a Polymerization, or some similar card. If Contact Fusion was required instead, this would have been a much more valid option to run in extra decks. But that is not the case. It is the case that Miracle Fusion can be used to bring it out if multiple masked heroes are in the graveyard. However, extra deck space is rather tight in this deck, and Contrast Summoning is not nearly consistent enough for my tastes. Diane is alright as another means to tutor Shadow Mist to the field, but with the to the graveyard aspect of its monster destruction effect, it is worthless against pendulum monsters, and also worthless when Darklaw is on the field, which is the principal goal of this deck. The reality is also disappointing that Diane is the only Earth masked hero, which leaves Earth elemental hero monsters out in the cold for this deck, and anyways, finding a base for it is somewhat difficult as the selection of high quality Earth elemental hero monsters is questionable. Anki is definitely a high quality monster with multiple useful effects. At 2800 attack, it is one of the heaviest hitters among the masked hero family, and the ability to attack directly for 1400 damage is rather helpful against certain fields. However, the effect that really shines is the change quick play spell search effect, which in a sense pays for its own summons. Running one copy of Anki is rather standard and certainly makes sense. Divine Wind has the same general problem as Diane in the fact that it's worthless against pendulum monsters, and when Darklaw is on the field. In addition, its anti-battle destruction effect is fine, but not really helpful for a 2700 attack monster. Without an attack magnet effect, its 1 attack per turn condition is of limited effectiveness because swarming is not really something that heroes do that effectively, or even really want to do in a masked hero build. They can at times, but it's not their forte. Finally, the side problem with Divine Wind is the lack of a base monster to make it in the first place, for with Stratos banned, the only available wind elemental hero monsters are Avian, Flame Wingman, Air Neos, Great Tornado, or Tempest, none of which want to be the base because of inefficiency. Overall, even if Stratos came back, in most situations I would prefer to use Stratos as part of a rank 4 play over using it as a base for Divine Wind. Acid is definitely a high quality masked fusion, both due to its primary Harpy Feather Duster effect, as well as its very easy to access base and Bubbleman. Unfortunately though, in the modern meta, Acid is probably more than likely going to just get Solemn Struck, but hey, that's one less Solemn Strike for you to deal with. Acid has also a very nice combo with Absolute Zero to attempt to liquidate all of the cards in your opponent's field that can't be destroyed by card effects. One is definitely worth it. I run one copy. Koga is the destruction specialist of the deck, netting 500 extra attack points per monster on the opponent's field, making it at least a 3,000 attacker when attacking into an opponent's monster. If that weren't enough, for monsters that can be targeted, Koga can typically drop their attack by another 800 to 1500 with its banish effect. Unfortunately, Koga has the same problem as Diane and Divine Wind, the lack of a quality base. While there are a number of light elemental heroes, they're just not really good enough to warrant running in this deck without significant question. Some players run one copy of Alias just as a 1900 attacking light for Koga, but overall for me that's just not good enough for the main deck, so Koga unfortunately is relegated to the side deck. In the past, Vapor was rather serviceable with its anti-destruction effect, but with only 2400 attack and a wider variety of options now in the current game to remove without destroying, Vapor is just not good enough anymore. Nothing really needs to be said about Darklaw that has not already been said by numerous people numerous times. It is the prime objective of the deck and can single-handedly destroy the entire play strategy of a wide variety of other decks. 2 copies for most of the time. If you really have to go into that third Darklaw, the duel certainly has not been going in your favor, and that extra deck spot is usually going to be more versatile and effective, being occupied by something else. Unfortunately, the only fire-based masked hero is rather forgettable, as all Goka really has is raw attack power, and that raw attack power is rather poorly managed because most masked hero decks do not run that many hero monsters to begin with, again because most of the main deck elemental heroes aren't very good, and some of those monsters, depending on the deck design, including this one, will be removed from the graveyard through the use of Miracle Fusion. Hopefully sometime in the future a second fire-based masked hero can arrive on the scene to actually help the archetype, but I'm not holding my breath. Overall, in my opinion, Blast is worse than Divine Wind, and has the same general base problem. Skip it. Similar to Darklaw, there's not much to say about Mask Change that has not already been said. It should be run at 3 copies in all serious pure Masked Hero builds. Its quick play status is rather nice because it can be set to activate either Darklaw or Acid when necessary, aids Shadow Mist getting both of its effect, once when it's originally special summoned during your turn, and then when it's sent to the graveyard via Mask Change during your opponent's turn, and can bait out opponent back row destruction. The problem with Form Change is it reads like a card where you're choosing from 25 different Masked Hero fusions, where there's this significant level of versatility. Obviously that's not the case, and as we just went over, most of the Masked Heroes that actually do exist aren't really that good. So the ability to jump between them is kind of irrelevant. This card might have been better if it gave you some form of banish it from the graveyard effect, but it doesn't even have that. Form Change really is just not worth it. Mask Change 2 is a card that, in my opinion, probably should not exist, because I'm of the mindset that if one wants to run Masked Heroes, one should have to run Heroes, but it does exist, and it makes a nice tech card for a wide variety of other decks, especially dark decks for Darklaw. However, with access to Mask Change, and the current build being discussed being more of a pure hero variety, this inferior version of Mask Change is not needed. The most important main deck elemental hero is, not surprisingly, Shadow Mist, the walking +1 machine, netting a +1 via its Change Search when special summoned, and netting a +1 with its Hero Search when sent to the graveyard via any method, as long as both events do not occur during the same turn. Common play involves special summoning Shadow Mist during your turn via one of many possible methods, getting the Mask Change Search, setting Change, then activating it during the opponent's turn for Darklaw, and getting the Hero Search. Some have made the argument of running 2 copies due to the concern about drawing it because of less ability to special summon it from hand, but realistically 3 copies should be run, if just not for the Hero Search alone. The other common and understandable choice for this deck at 3 copies is Bubbleman, for its special summoning ability makes XZ summoning much more effective to complement Darklaw summoning, and its ability to act as a water base for Acid. While its draw effect is rare, it's a nice bonus when it actually happens. While others choose to exclude Blazeman, I think 1 copy is important to provide additional versatility that helps the deck play out of certain situations where Darklaw is not applicable due to that Polymerization search. While Goka may be a bust as a monster, Nova Master is definitely a high-quality fusion option, which, unlike certain masked hero monsters, does not have the to the graveyard condition on its monster destruction effect, and with Blazeman's ability to search out Polymerization, going into Nova Master is rather easy. Clearly, special summoning Shadow Mist is an important attribute for this deck's success, so there must be an effective means to accomplish this strategy. In monster form, to accomplish this feat, I run the 2 allowable copies of Summoner Monk and 2 copies of Goblindbergh. The reason I don't run 3 copies of Goblindbergh is because drawing multiples early can really hurt, but only 1 copy is just too little, you don't see it enough. Both these selections, in my mind, are rather common. For the remaining spells, I run 3 copies of A Hero Lives to aid both Shadow Mist and Blazeman summoning, in addition to setting up XZ plays in the future depending exactly on how your hand shakes out, 3 copies of E-Emergency Call for searching, 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army for more searching, 1 Raigeki for board destruction, and 1 copy of Upstart Goblin for drawing. I also like running 1 copy of Instant Fusion for Norden summoning. Most people would argue 1 copy is not enough, but there are certain techs I like to include in this deck, so going up to 3 just for Norden isn't super important, in my opinion, in the pure build. Other builds, that may be different, but for the pure build, I think 1 copy is sufficient. 1 copy of Polymerization to work in consort with Blazeman's effect, and 1 copy of Miracle Fusion. These 2 standard fusion cards help make the additional advantage plays through summoning things like Absolute Zero or Nova Master. Polymerization can also help drive the duel forward when Shadow Mist is drawn without the ability to special summon it from the hand, because you can use it in a fusion and then at least get your hero search that 90-something% of the time will be a Bubbleman that more than likely you might be able to make a Nova Master and some rank 4 XZ off of. 1 copy of Mass Charge is rather standard for this deck because while it is an inherent +1, drawing it early can really hurt, so you want to avoid the multiples. Charge might be worth 2 copies if there were more quality masked heroes, or in a deck that was more heavily dedicated to contrast summoning. Finally, I run some possibly controversial choices. First, 1 copy of One Day of Peace. My stance towards One Day of Peace has always been the same. If you run a deck that has huge combo potential, i.e. something like DDDs or Dragoonides that can create an incredibly nasty board that has negation qualities to it, you should run One Day, for the negative consequence of giving the opponent a draw is definitely worth it to increase the probability of getting that board. This philosophy also applies to decks that have game-altering cards. Darklaw fits that bill. There's a big difference in the way most opponents play when Darklaw is sitting on the field versus when he's not. Second, I run 3 copies of Book of Eclipse. Eclipse, the old, almost staple side deck card back in when Nekroz was ruining everything, both for Nekroz and against Nekroz. Eclipse is rather nice for this deck because it offers a nice level of additional protection for Darklaw. Due to Darklaw's banish effect, the cards that the opponent may draw off of Eclipse are of less inherent value, especially because draw occurs during the end phase, they can't use the cards immediately, and you can stop a big power play that they might be making that could remove Darklaw from the field. Some might argue that allowing your opponent to draw via Book of Eclipse provides more opportunities to draw outs to Darklaw. This is a valid point, but remember that when you're using Book of Eclipse, it's being used to immediately address a threat to Darklaw. Also, Eclipse is still one of the best ways to either dislodge an opponent's powerful board by flipping everything face down, or force them to use a form of negation they may have on that board, increasing the probability that you can then go forward and make your plays successfully. Remember, this deck is not always going to go first. Finally, returning to the effect of A Hero Lives, its activation is contingent on not having a face-up monster. This issue can be rectified by Book of Eclipse, thus reducing the dead-in-hand capacity of A Hero Lives, especially after you've already used one of them, when the life point cost of using a second is significantly been reduced. One spell that is missing that some might raise an eyebrow to is Soul Charge. Soul Charge, in my opinion, is a preference choice in this deck, because the problem is those a hero lives, they suck up a lot of life points. Most of the time, in my experience in this deck, Soul Charge is kind of just like a monster reborn, because you're only going to typically revive one, maybe two monsters with it, but then you also lose your battle phase, which is typically a big negative for this deck with Soul Charge, because with all of the fusion Namis, it's very difficult to actually set up a board where you can do some major damage without utilizing your battle phase. Other times, Soul Charge will save your butt. So, in my opinion, Soul Charge is one of those situations where, for this deck, you can't say, oh yeah, you definitely have to run it, or, oh no, you never run it. It's a preference choice. Anyone who thinks otherwise, I think, is just putting too much stock in their own opinion. For the trap selection, I'm not a fan of running the Solemns in this deck, similar to why I'm not a fan of running Soul Charge, because the costs associated with early activations of a hero lives are rather debilitating, and can heavily diminish the values of Solemns. Also, Rafflesia is a popular extra deck choice, and Solemns do not work with its effect. And I think a lot of the time people would be better served by running more fuel for Rafflesia's effect, rather than running the Solemns. However, I will certainly not begrudge anyone who chooses to run Solemns. In my opinion, I just don't think they work that effectively for this deck. However, while I do not run Solemns, I appreciate the need for negation ability in this deck, in counter-trap form. Therefore, instead of the Solemns, I like running 3 copies of Ultimate Providence. While some might balk at running a card that is inherently a -1, this deck can produce certain gluts of resource advantage, both in spell cards, especially those dead a hero lives sitting in your hand, and to a lesser extent monsters, thanks to both Mask Charge and Shadow Mist's effect, providing the necessary discard fodder to properly manage Providence activation. In my experience, Providence commonly provides the necessary versatility to protect Dark Law, going beyond what a Solemn Strike or Solemn Warning can do. Closing up the traps, I run 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness and various trap holes to help support both Rafflesia and hurt the opponent's ability to make plays, in the form of 1 Bottomless trap hole, 1 Floodgate trap hole, 1 Traptrix trap hole Nightmare, and 2 copies of Void trap hole. I think Void Trap Hole is probably the most underrated trap hole of the trap hole family. One popular choice that I do not run is Mirror Force. Some players like running Mirror Force because with Dark Law on the field, it banishes instead of putting cards into the graveyard, but it still has to destroy first. So cards that receive effects when destroyed that do not have the condition of and sent to the graveyard or activate in the graveyard as well still receive their effects. Overall, in my opinion, the original Mirror Force is too inconsistent. If you want to run Mirror Force, run one of the variants, either Storming or Quaking. For the additional extra deck monsters, I run 1 Elemental Hero Nova Master, 2 copies of Elemental Hero Absolute Zero, 1 Elder Entity Norden, 1 number 38, 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 39 Utopia, 1 number 37 Hope Woven Dragon, Spider, Shark. I almost never see this in pure builds. Heck, I don't see this in Tree Toad builds that often, which is weird. I have 4 level 4 Waters, the 3 Bubbleman, and Norden. Number 37 will hit the field with a significant level of consistency. 1 Blade Armor Ninja, 1 Castel, and obviously the 1 Traptrix or Rafflesia. Well, that is one type of hero build that I like to run, the pure kind of masked hero variant. But there are other competitive hero builds that may appeal to others that want some interesting hybrid action over the more pure form. So what other types of hero decks are out there? First, let's look at how I like to combine Resonators in masked heroes. The monster lineup changes a little with Blazeman departing, as well as the 2 Goblindberghs, and 3 copies of Red Resonator and 2 copies of Synchron Resonator being added to provide necessary synchro support, as well as Red Resonator having the ability to take over the role of Goblindbergh in the special summoning Shadow Mist from the hand. Silent Swordman also slides into this deck thanks to a certain change in the trap lineup making him easier to summon, and Silent Swordsman is a very powerful card and should be highly considered for all warrior builds. For the spells, 2 copies of Resonator Call and 1 copy of Soul Charge replace the fusion elements, Polymerization and Miracle Fusion, and the 1 copy of Upstart. Obviously, Soul Charge comes in because Red Resonator's special summon from the graveyard life point gain effect now can heavily make up for early turn use of a hero lives. For the traps, all of the trap pulls other than Bottomless are dropped, as well as the 3 copies of Ultimate Providence for 2 copies of Solemn Strike, 1 copy of Solemn Warning, and 3 copies of Call of the Haunted. Once again, thanks to Red Resonator's life point gain, I feel more comfortable running the Solemn cards in this build versus my pure build. For the extra deck, I run 2 Masked Hero Darklaw, 1 Masked Hero Acid, 1 Elder Entity Norden, 1 Leo the Keeper of the Sacred Tree, 1 Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, 1 Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 1 Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend, 1 Coral Dragon, 1 Red Rising Dragon, 1 Samsara Dragon of Rebirth, 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 1 number 39 Utopia, 1 number 37 Hope Woven Dragon Spider Shark, I still have the 4 level 4 waters, and 1 Castel, the Skyblaster Musketeer. Well, that concludes the Resonator build. So how do I use Phantom Knights and Masked Heroes together? For the Phantom Knight build, looking at the monsters first, not surprisingly, I run 3 copies of Cloak, 3 copies of Boots, and 3 copies of Gloves, along with the Terratop engine, 3 Terratop, and 1 copy of Take Tomborg. I run 2 copies of Shadow Mist instead of 3 copies because now you have a much more difficult time of summoning Shadow Mist from the hand, because some variants of this deck run a card like Marauding Captain. I choose not to run Marauding Captain because I like to use the space for other things. And I run 1 copy of Bubbleman. While typically Bubbleman is persona non grata in a lot of other Phantom Knight Masked Hero hybrids, I like running it because it gives Shadow Mist a search target, so you typically will net your +1, and it provides a nice ability to complement rank 4 summoning. In addition, it also opens you up being able to run Acid, and Acid is definitely a quality monster. Also, I like running 1 copy of Armageddon Knight for deck dumping purposes. You see Armageddon Knight in kind of purish builds, or kind of Protect the Darklaw build, but you don't see Armageddon Knight a lot in the Phantom Knight hybrids. That's a little strange for me. You'd think Armageddon Knight would be more favored in the Phantom Knight hybrid versus the pure build. I also run 1 copy of Blackwing Zephyros the Elite, and similar to Armageddon Knight, you see Elite in the pure builds, but you tend not to see Elite in the hybrids between Phantom Knights and Masked Heroes, which is a little peculiar to me. Elite is a card that really should see more play in general in any type of Phantom Knight hybrid, because it can return Fog Blades to the hand, enabling you to attack against opponent monsters that might have been previously locked down by those Fog Blades, while also letting you reuse that Fog Blade, in addition to taking some of the pressure off of Breaksword's effect to remove that Fog Blade and opening up your ability to attack again. Finally, I run 1 copy of Fragile Armor. In my opinion, Armor has been given a little too much grief within the general assessment that the level 4 Phantom Knights are bad, stay away from them. Yes, Cloven Helmet is bad, in my opinion. Stay away from Cloven Helmet. Armor works nicely in combination with Breaksword's effect to summon a 3-material Dark rank 4 if you choose to run them, or something like number 86, because we all know there's a big step up from its I've got 2 materials to I've got 3 materials effects, or it provides a second piece to put 2 rank 4 Xyz on the field. Its graveyard effect is actually rather useful as well, because it can dump a Phantom Knight card, not just a monster, allowing for some nice combo potential. Multiple copies of Armor are dicey. Probably shouldn't run multiple copies, but 1 copy works nicely, at least for me, largely because it is searchable, so you can add it to your hand when you know it's going to be more of use. For the different and notable spells, 3 copies of Mask Change 2 and 1 copy of Mask Change, due to only having 3 elemental heroes in the deck. 2 copies of Transmodify for converting a Phantom Knight to one of the level 4 monsters, normally a Shadow Mist for faster Darklaw access. 2 copies of Gold Sarcophagus to work with Leviair summoning for faster Darklaw access. 1 copy of Foolish Burial for deck dumping purposes. And, come the release of Vengeance, 1 copy of Rank Up Magic, the Phantom Knights of Launch, which is both searchable via Cloak and rather nice at getting out Requiem. Finally, for the traps, I run 3 copies of Fogblade, 1 copy of Wing, 2 copies of Solemn Strike, 1 copy of Solemn Warning, and 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness. For the extra deck, I run 1 Masked Hero Acid, 2 Masked Hero Dark Law, 1 Dark Requiem X Sea Dragon, 1 Dark Rebellion X Sea Dragon, 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 1 number 39 Utopia, 1 number 86, 1 number 66 Master Key Beetle, 1 number 47 Nightmare Shark, 1 Totem Bird, 2 the Phantom Knights of Breaksword, and 2 Levier the Sea Dragon. Utopic Future and Mechaquip Engineer are also other options here. Now, it should be acknowledged that there are builds that put more focus on getting Dark Law into the field faster by using 2 to 3 copies of Allure of Darkness, a 3rd Shadow Mist, a 3rd Levier. However, I like the better stability of this deck, but if for you getting Dark Law in the field as fast as possible, you might want to lean that way away from this deck. Finally, I guess we have to talk about Tree Toad Heroes. Overall, I think Tree Toad Heroes is getting a little too much hype, but let's look at a general skeleton for a standard build. Not surprisingly, Tin Goldfish is used to hasten the summoning of Bahamut Shark or Shadow Mist, along with Bubbleman's special summoning effect. Also, this build generally runs 3 copies of Instant Fusion to increase the probability of Norden summoning, along with various other draw cards like Max C and Pot of Desires. Right now, there's nothing overwhelmingly interesting to change in this build beyond small, minute preference changes like in the trap lineup. In the end, overall, regardless of what Masked Hero build you prefer to run, the deck will be competitive solely because of Dark Law. However, I feel the importance in the deck design in these types of decks is not to rely too much on Dark Law, but to make sure that other avenues of victory exist. Well, those are my Masked Hero decks. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.